Let's continue with this story now. The controversial Electoral Amendment Bill is in Parliament today for MPs' consideration. That should be happening at 2 o'clock. But there have been growing calls from civil society organizations asking MPs not to support that bill. The Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution is among them. And for more on this, I'm joined by Lawson Naidoo from CASAC. Mr. Naidoo, thank you so much for speaking to us. I mean, for a lot of people, this is quite outrageous that, something like this is even being discussed in Parliament, where you're expecting that an individual will have to compete with an entire political party.
Indeed, it is. It is an incredibly unfair piece of legislation that has been processed by the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs. And the opposition to this piece of legislation is growing by the day and, in fact, by the hour. There are a range of civil society organizations opposed to this. There are a number of political parties who are going to be voting against the bill this afternoon, as well as potential independent candidates who are not satisfied with what the bill proposes. And Parliament has really missed an opportunity to put in place a constituency system that is so necessary in South Africa. It's a system that has been called for by the Van Zyl-Slabbert task team more than 20 years ago, by former President Botlante's high-level panel, as well as by Chief Justice Zondo in his State Capture Commission report. But Parliament has chosen to ignore all of that and go with a system that is not used anywhere else in the world. It's a unique system, and it's full of flaws and unintended consequences. So I think the responsible thing for Parliament to do this afternoon is to refer the bill back to the committee and ask them to reconsider the bill in its totality and not to vote for that bill.
But what's also funny about the Advisory Committee of Home Affairs, Mr. Naidoo, is the fact that there were two views. There was a majority view and there was a minority view. And what's being tabled in Parliament today is the minority view. Why do you think that is? Are we seeing politicians here being politicians instead of being people that are accountable to the electorate?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. This is about the Minister of Home Affairs has not explained why he chose the minority view of his very own Ministerial Advisory Committee to put in place a system that is proving to be unworkable, except one can surmise that it's on the basis that it gives political parties, or it retains the stranglehold that political parties have over their deployed members. That could be the only reasoning behind coming up with such a convoluted bill as this, whereas the majority of that advisory committee recommended precisely what I'm suggesting, which is a mixed single-member constituency together with the PR list system that will ensure proportionality and will ensure, most importantly, that our representatives are more directly accountable to the people that put them there, which is us, the voters. At the moment, MPs are only accountable to their political parties and not to the people who voted them into office.
Well, at a press briefing, Minister Aaron Motsoaledi yesterday seems to have said to journalists that he doesn't understand the whole debate about there being two different views. He says that the advisory committee gave him two options, and he and his team decided to go for the one they thought was best. Which obviously a lot of people would ask themselves why he would think that the second version or the second view would be the best one. But he also says if this bill is passed, it can always be taken to the Constitutional Court, and whatever the Constitutional Court decides, he will adhere to it.
Well, I think at the very least, the minister is being economical with the truth. Yes, he did get two different opinions, but there was a view that was supported by a majority of the members of that advisory committee that he has ignored. And there was another view by the minority, which he seems to have gone for. But the minister is playing a very dangerous game if he thinks that this matter being referred to the Constitutional Court is a solution to the issue. We have an election coming up in 18 months' time, and we don't have an electoral system in which to run those elections. So the minister is playing with fire here. He's playing with the very foundations of our democracy. And I would suggest that the minister is acting in an entirely irresponsible manner in dealing with such a critical piece of legislation that strikes at the very heart of our democracy, which is the right to vote.
It would say a lot about those members in Parliament, wouldn't it, Mr. Naidoo, if this bill is passed? It would say to South Africans, not only are we dealing with one party that doesn't want to be held accountable, we're dealing with the entire political sphere in South Africa that doesn't want to be held accountable.
Yeah, and we've already seen from recent elections in 2019, as well as the local government elections in 2021, dwindling levels of voter participation in elections. And if this is the way the Minister and Parliament is going to be treating the electorate, we can only anticipate that the next election will see even lower numbers of people bothering to go out and vote because political parties are not treating them or us with the respect that we deserve.
And talking about respect, Mr. Naidoo, the fact that it had to go all the way to the Constitutional Court, I think, the fact that it had to go all the way to the Constitutional Court for government or Parliament to be let known that this entire time it hasn't been legal, it says that this entire time my vote really wasn't important for them then. I've been wasting my time all of these years.
Well, I mean, the system has worked incredibly well for political parties, which is why there's been no desire to change the system until the Constitutional Court forced this process. But like I pointed out before, we've had independent commissions and panels for more than 20 years telling us to change the system to a constituency-based model. And Parliament has simply ignored all of those views and continues to ignore those very sensible views, which are put forward in order to enhance accountability in our politics, something that the Zondo Commission highlighted as being a deficiency in our system of governance.
So I guess that extension to the 10th of December is quite important that Parliament meets it. But also my concern, Mr. Naidoo, is the fact that civil society organizations, including yourselves, are saying that those March public hearings did not happen fairly. They were last minute. There was no proper communication. And December 10th is in a couple of weeks' time. And now we're going to be faced with the issue of trying to scramble everything and educate everybody before the elections in 18 months' time.
Indeed, the public participation that was held in March this year was a sham. The announcement was made on a Friday. The hearing started the following Monday. No information was shared with members of the public about the Ministerial Advisory Committee report, and the two opinions that we discussed earlier were not shared with members of the public. And there's lots of anecdotal evidence to suggest that political parties bussed people into those public hearings, and people were reading from scripts supporting the bill without understanding what was going on. When the proper process of public participation took place and oral submissions were made in Parliament, almost without exception, everyone that appeared there disagreed with the bill, and yet the committee has ignored all of those views, and therefore, in my view, has acted in a highly irrational manner.
And I think what's also important, Mr. Naidoo, is that if there ever is more public hearings that are announced, it's very important for the electorate to understand their right and to understand that they have every right to participate, and they too actually have a responsibility to participate in these talks. But thank you so much for speaking to us, Mr. Lawson Naidoo from the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. It's going to be very interesting. At 2 o'clock, they are going to be discussing in Parliament this bill and whether or not it will be passed. Let's take